Now we come to the real purpose of this meeting, to appoint a successor to our dear friend, Peter Bailey.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to get to my real purpose.
Wait just a minute now.
Wait for what? I claim this institution is not necessary to this town. Therefore, Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to dissolve this institution and turn its assets and liabilities over to the receiver.
What are you dirty, considerable? I'll read his next one. George, did you hear what that was?
It's too soon after Peter Bailey's death to talk about chloroforming the building and loan.
Peter Bailey died 3 months ago. I second Mr. Potter's motion.
Very well. In that case, I'll ask the 2 executive officers to withdraw. But before you go, I'm sure the whole board wishes to express its deep sorrow at the passing of Peter Bailey.
Thank you.
It was his faith and devotion that are responsible for this organization.
I'll go further than that. I'll say that to the public, Peter Bailey was the building and loan.
Oh, that's fine, Potter, coming from you, considering that you probably drove him to his grave.
Peter Bailey was not a businessman. That's what killed him. Oh, I don't mean any disrespect to him, God rest his soul. He was a man of high ideals, so-called. But ideals without common sense can ruin this town. Now, you take this loan here to Ernie Bishop. You know, that fellow that sits around all day on his brains in his taxi, you know. I happen to know the bank turned down this loan, but he comes here, and we're building him a house worth $5,000. Why?
Well, I handled that, Mr. Potter. You have all the papers there, his salary, insurance. I can personally vouch for his character.
Friend of yours?
Yes, sir.
You see, if you shoot pool with some employee here, you can come and borrow money. What does that get us? A discontented, lazy rabble instead of a thrifty working class. And all because a few starry-eyed dreamers like Peter Bailey stir 'em up and fill their head with a lot of impossible ideas. Now, I say...
Just a minute. Just a minute. Now, hold on, Mr. Potter. Just a minute. Now, you're right when you say my father was no businessman. I know that. Why he ever started this cheap penny-ante building and loan, I'll never know. But neither you nor anybody else can say anything against his character because his whole life was... Why, in the 25 years since he and Uncle Billy started this thing, he never once thought of himself. Isn't that right, Uncle Billy? He didn't save enough money to send Harry to school, let alone me. But he did help a few people get out of your slums, Mr. Potter. And what's wrong with that? Well, here, you're all businessmen here. Doesn't it make them better citizens? Doesn't it make them better customers? You said that what'd you say just a minute ago? They had to wait and save their money before they even thought of a decent home? Wait for what? Until their children grow up and leave them? Until they're so old and broken down that you know how long it takes a working man to save $5,000? Just remember this, Mr. Potter, that this rabble you're talking about, they do most of the working and paying and living and dying in this community. Well, is it too much to have them work and pay and live and die in a couple of decent rooms and a bath? Anyway, my father didn't think so. People were human beings to him, but to you, a warped, frustrated old man, they're cattle. Well, in my book, he died a much richer man than you'll ever be.
I'm not interested in your book. I'm talking about the building and loan.
I know very well what you're talking about. You're talking about something you can't get your fingers on, and it's galling you. That's what you're talking about, I know. Well, I've said too much. You're the board here. You do what you want with this thing. There's just one thing more, though. This town needs this measly one-horse institution, if only to have some place where people can come without crawling to Potter.
This next scene is one of my favorite, with George with the black armband 3 months later.
See, I noticed, I was like, that's subtle. They never said anything. They just had the black armband until they never said, like, oh no, he died. It just kind of happened over the conversation.
Well, and then they mentioned, so.
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, this is one of my favorite non-ending scene. This might be my favorite non-last 30 minutes scene, is when he gives that speech to Potter. Potter totally blows it too, by the way. But Potter gives the backhanded compliment, your father, Peter Bailey was no businessman. No disrespect, guy just died 3 months ago. But not to mention, how about the asshole voting with him on the side? He goes, it's been 3 months. I'm with Potter. Did you hear him? Check out this dickhead. So
Yeah.
that scene, and then he's telling him why they got to get rid of Bailey building and loan, and they were gonna vote. George and Uncle Billy were board members, so they didn't have a vote. They were going to be out of the room, and Mr. Potter had to give his little dig to, and George was like, he's like, Peter Bailey, wasn't a businessman. It just gave him a little dig, and then bashing all the, the rabble, as he called it. Is that what he said?
Yeah. Yep.
And then George stops, and George gives that great speech. They do all the living, the earning,
Dying.
I don't have the quote, the living and dying, and fantastic speech. You're nothing but a spider, or was that later? Spider's later.
Later.
Nothing but a frustrated old man.
Yeah.
That's what he says. You're nothing but a. So George obviously sways the board to vote. Mr. Potter, he makes a face like, oh, I screwed up. I blew that one. And
He overplayed his hand.
So the board votes with George, and one of the great scenes is when, just one of Jimmy Stewart's great acting scenes is when the guy says, "You have to stay here." They'll only vote with Potter and he has that close up on his face, and he's like tortured that he has to stay again.
Again, that's the second time. But the reason why I love that scene is I'm always an advocate for the underdog, and he was dead on. All the people that live in these towns that do all the work and the dying and
right.
do all the manual labor. Is it too much to give them a bath? He said, "Is it too much to give them a roof and a bath?"
Yeah. He said, "Save the money for what? So they could, their kids can get old." And it's great. He even mentions. He actually mentions I think Ernie, right? He mentions Ernie. He giving a house to Ernie, a $5,000 house, and he's like, I approve that. So,
yep.
We were saying how great
because they played pool together.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
So,
I have a quick question.
Sure.
What is a buildings and loan? It's like a credit union kind of thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. We don't want to get into the economics. We need an economics expert. Well, the next we're going to be talking about the run on the bank.
That's another thing I did not understand. I just assumed it was the Depression. I just didn't.
That was so. You have three chances that George could have got out and done something different. We missed one of them, right? No, not yet. So the next one was really where he was going. He was waiting for his brother, Harry, to come home.
That was the second one. So yeah. So after that great scene, I think Harry comes home.
Yeah.
Because George had to. Because George, unless George stayed, they would vote with Potter. So Harry came home, and that's when Harry's new wife drops the bombshell on George.
Yeah.
And selfish old Harry, he's like, she spoke out of turn. We'll talk about it. Well, we talked about it already, obviously.
Yeah.
Obviously, he's off.
I'm afraid what we'll talk about it means.
He's great with research, apparently.
Yeah, that was so. You're right. That's the second chance of getting out. You're right. But he went to Harry's wife and said, is this a good opportunity for him?
Yeah.
And
right. I think George pushed it. George obviously was like, all right, I gotta let Harry do his stupid ass research. He's good at it.
Yeah.
So.
But he was the bigger person, and he could have stepped up and said, you know what, it's my turn. You got to stay back here. I'm sorry, but he didn't. And he let Harry, continue to move on in his direction. And really, if you think about it, Harry had no problem with saying, you don't see that conversation, but obviously it must have happened. And Harry was fine with just going back to Buffalo.
This is how the conversation went. Harry, I've been thinking about it. This is a great, you're right, George. I'm going.
And George is like, oh, okay, yeah, definitely.
Oh, I guess so. It's all about Harry.
Yeah.
So the next one is their wedding, after their wedding celebration, when we won't talk about George inappropriately kissing his mother on the lips with John and Paul.
Which has had a lot of play lately. Which I didn't listen to the banter because I don't want to hear it.
Nope.
I don't want to watch this movie. I don't want to see anything like that in my own mind.
I saw the text before I saw the scene, and I go, "Oh, there it is."
Well, some families are different. So that scene that led up to first it was that Uncle Billy was hammered, was great. I think Jimmy Stewart was genuinely cracking up because you see him like just joy on his face, like smiling at Uncle Billy. And supposedly, so when he goes off screen, somebody off screen knocks something over and makes a noise, and Thomas Mitchell yells out, "I'm all right." So that's why Jimmy Stewart laughs. Like,
yeah, I read that was ad-libbed.
Supposed to happen.
Well, first of all, Tommy Mitchell's the actor that played Uncle Billy. You said. Yeah. Unbelievable actor. He was such a great character actor.
For something else.
For something else. He was such a great character actor in that movie.
Yeah, he was in Mr. Smith Goes to Washington too.
But for me, that scene, I love that scene because the anger that was boiling him was just coming to the surface, and him with that stick, going against the picket fence.
Oh yeah.
Up and down the picket fence, and just, do I want to do it? Do I not want to do it?
Yeah, it's kind of the only conversation he had with his mother too, who was kind of like, Mary likes you, she doesn't like Sam. And but yeah, the Mary was great in that scene too when she smashes the record.
Well, she says to her mother, "He's making violent love to me." Like, that must have been so risque back in 1946 or whatever it was.
Yeah, that was good stuff. Poor Mrs.
Watching her say that, I'm not gonna lie, it's pretty arousing.
We all know we don't need to. Yeah, we don't need to. Kids will be listening to this. We don't need to be talking about your Mary scene,
your kink.
Lubriderm.
Top 5 for me.
But
Jergens.
George was a complete jerk in that scene.
Asshole. He was an asshole.
You could.
He was.
Show the human side of him. He was such a jerk.
You see, but you got. It's just a frustration. That's why I showed you. I sent that video, guys. That part of the movie things. I love that. That section of the movie was so good, and I think that's where he put on the best acting display for me, anyways.
Like he said it a couple times where he's like, I didn't tell anyone I was coming here. I didn't tell it. Like he made an emphasis. Like
he was so aggravated.
Yeah.
He was so aggravated. But again, this is a guy who was the leader of his pack, had a ton of ambition, intelligent kid, intelligent guy, and he's constantly taking that backseat to everyone else. His friend George is in New York, a multimillionaire now, with the girl that he loves or assumes that he loves, and she loves George, whatever. Sam. But you can just
that would be confusing if they named them both George.
That build up to that scene on the staircase was incredible. It was such a great scene.
He shook her pretty good too. I was like, "Whoa, George!" I was ready for the old classic movie slap.
Yeah,
different times.
Different times. But, even Sean Connery did one or two of those.
Yeah.
So the next scene was their wedding, right? And then
went right to a wedding. Yeah. And then
it was pouring, and then the bank run. Mikey, tell us a little about a bank run.
My understanding is the stock exchange is crashing, so people are. Damn it.
No. I was going to say, I always used to think it was 1929. I assumed it was the stock market crash, but my brother, Greg, pointed this out, that the math didn't work. He graduated from high school in 1928.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it was like the third. It was just, I guess there was, during the Great Depression, there were bank runs, which
it was just a common thing where people just needed to get their money out.
People panicked and all wanted to get their money out, which obviously, they couldn't. The bank couldn't do that. Like George says, it's in your house, so there was a run on the bank, and then Potter swooped, and I guess he became like obviously a majority stockholder or something in the bank. Yeah. His office is at the bank, so he's like obviously doesn't own the bank, but for all intents and purposes. So he wanted to dissolve the building and loan, and great job by Uncle Billy. Speaking of the second asshole, Uncle Billy closes the doors and he's boozing. All right, it was funny at the wedding, Uncle Billy.
He was cowering.
What's with Uncle Billy and
Put
the
the
animals?
bottle down. You have a job.
They have a crow that seems to live in the office.
That's
He has a
Billy's
squirrel
crow.
at home.
Yeah.
Oh, Grace and I counted. Uncle Billy had like 5 animals in his house. At least 5 animals.
No explanation.
That's
Just like
that's
it's just
an Easter egg.
character.
So that's a great scene. The bank run is a fantastic scene. Mary actually originally says, "Don't we can't stop." But Mary, selfless also says, you know, I have money. How much does she have? I forget.
It was
$2,000.
Okay.
That's right.
That selfish prick
Bastard.
asked for all of his $287.
$242.
$242.
And
So that
83
lady who
cents,
said
something stupid.
$17.50, I guess it wasn't in the script. So Jimmy Stewart was surprised that she said that. That's why he kissed her. He wasn't supposed to do that.
That's awesome.
Great scene.
That was
So-
a great scene. But that's
And then
another
the-
scene. That's a setup for the third missed opportunity to take an adventure. He was going to go to New York, and then to London and Paris.
Oh, right. Yes.
Big honeymoon.
Exactly. Just to get out. They had
Just to get out and see the part of the world that he wanted. He wanted to go. And that was dissolved, obviously, because of
and then that led to Mary's extravagant job of decorating.
hiding the purchase of that house.
Hiding the purchase, doing what she like. Greg brought this up the other night, but who set up the rotisserie record? Like, what is she, an engineer?
That was impressive.
Oh,
It was
like
probably
that-
Ernie or Bert. They helped a lot.
Fantastic. Those 2 numbskulls.
And then they were serenading them as they were in their bedroom, which is even weirder.
Awesome.
I wanted like peeking in.
So
Yeah.
that scene was great. There was the random guy who was helping him, complaining that he had to put up the signs, and then he's like, "What?" He's like, "This is for the groom. You know, they got married." And he's like, "What are they, ducks?" That guy who was in no other scenes. It was fantastic.
And I
But
like
yeah,
George
does
kind of like looking around. Then he looks in the bedroom and goes, gives
he
a little
looks in the
double take.
bedroom and he does a double take. He's like, "Oh,
When George was shaking Mary on the stick, he said he didn't want to get married. Did he say you don't want to have kids too? Did he say that? I'm not sure if that was in the line.
I don't know. I don't think so.
I know he said you don't want to get married, but kind of when it goes because after that scene he got married and then they basically just had kids.
Well, we know he says he wished he didn't have the kids after the fact,
Yeah, which
is fantastic.
Such a shit move on George's behalf.
But that's he's human. You don't want him to sit.
Yeah.
That's the great part of George Bailey. He's not above reproach.
After that scene, he went to Potter, and then Potter offered him the job.
That's one of the best scenes too. One of the many best scenes.
We've gone from one best scene to the next best scene.
I did. Well, but this is my top scenes are really George's speech. It changes. It often changes, but the run on the bank has always been one of my top scenes. Fantastic. But then when Potter offers him the job,
Okay.
it's great.
He offers him $20,000 a year. What I saw the trivia of what that is equal to today. Does anyone want to guess what $20,000 a year would be equal to in today's?
But $100,000.
$300,000.
$372,807. Yeah,
Wow.
$372,000.
that's how
5-year
much
contract or
20,000.
something.
Wow.
I think it was
That
three,
yeah.
only because
That's
that's
fantastic.
And he shook his hand and realized
It's
I'm
great.
shaking the hand with the fucking basically the devil.
he looked at his hand.
With
My
disgust.
buddy Brian
Yeah.
that I mentioned said that's his favorite scene. It's when he just looks at his hand and sees
But
slimy.
Mikey, that's a great point though, because we look at $20,000 and you're gonna go to Europe and all that stuff. But when you put it in those terms, $372,000 and then
Yeah,
constant travel
for 3
to
years,
Europe,
he'd be rich. Yeah.
he'd be rich. He
By the way-
he could have retired.
By the way, I have two things about Mr.
He was-
Potter. You thought I was going to say he was one of the villains. He's my third favorite character.
I just want to say
Lionel
real quick,
Barrymore.
back to the money. Wait, George was making only $45 a week. So yes, 20,000 is huge.
A bit of a bump.
Yeah.
But but again, it goes back to the whole traveling piece and seeing the world. He was like, not going to happen. He's not going to, he's not shaking hands with the devil.
A man of principle.
Making that pact.
You're right. He doesn't sell his soul and give his wife trips to New York, which is, pretty. Yeah. No, I say good for George, but I got some notes about Henry F. Potter. But by the way, Lionel Barrymore, I have written it. His acting is fantastic. He gives a tour de force. What's the word I'm looking for? Performance.
Yeah.
I said Lionel Barrymore is awesome as Mr. Potter.
Yeah, he was.
His acting is great. My two favorite parts is when George is given that great speech after his father dies. Did you notice he yawns?
Yeah.
You notice he does that. He puts his hand over his mouth. He's like.
But he was also very like, no disrespect. Your dad.
Yeah, exactly.
No disrespect.
It's great.
But.
And the other thing is awesome when George goes. He goes, "Why do you want to see me?" And he just starts laughing. He goes, "Look at you, always getting right to the point."
Yeah.
He's great.
He realized that George was definitely his nemesis in his own mind. The one person that could stand between him and what he was trying to gain. And that person really stood for character and morality, and those are high traits that come by with people even nowadays. So I thought that in his mind he could have definitely swayed him with that offer, and it must have been jarring when he was like, "No, this is not happening. I'm not making this deal."
No, George didn't even boom. He's like woke up out of a trance. He's like, this wasn't even an option.
Yeah, but then he goes home. But then he goes home and finds out that he's having a baby.
Right.
So,
but
he wasn't. Thought after that.
He was happy.
Yeah,
and then,
but he was also thinking to himself that I think he always felt a little like I know what he felt. He felt bad that he couldn't provide Mary the life that he thought she deserved. So that's why he asked her if she was happy and all that when he got home. So
yeah, I was like, oh, okay, here we go. Now he's going to run to the bridge. I was way off.
Way off.
That would have been early. That would have been like, George, where you going? But right, so the next they do like the montage of him. This is when was the next scene when Sam Wainwright, when he goes and he's at the Martinis. He gives the Martinis their house.
No. At that point, they showed him and Mary building their house together. Like they're painting and refinishing, all that work they're putting into it. And every time he walked up the stairs, he'd pull the newel post and it would fall off his hand.
Yeah.
So.
But and then
they show him doing that.
And then they show but George is aggravated that and then they give Martini gets his house.
Yeah.
And Sam Wainwright shows up and George gets kind of aggravated at that. He says, I offered this guy a job at the ground floor in plastics.
Yep.
And George is aggravated at that, but
still the old buildings and loan.
Yeah.
This guy's got his own chauffeur.
He came in with his car and he came in with his, this pretty girl, whatever. Listen, I thought, in that scene, it's another telling scene of George's character, though, and even Mary's character, how they all went for the ride with Martini to the house. They all, they brought them the bread and the wine and
the salt.
And the salt.
Wine, salt, and bread.
Yeah.
Mary's a freak.
For those garlic
Mary's
eaters.
obviously. What?
For those dirty garlic eaters.
Yes. To give them to kill the odor of the garlic breath. Next is Christmas Eve after they give the little montage. They talk about the war. They talk about what everybody did. Mr. Potter was on the draft board.
Yep.
George did the rubber drive and air raid warden or whatever he was.
Air raid warden, yep.
And
you can see how frustrated he was doing that because he couldn't he couldn't join the
He was
military.
4F. Yep.
Yeah. So you can see how
And,
disgusting he was when he was blowing his whistle. Remember?
Yeah. And he spits on his shoulder. Great stuff.
And then Harry's off, flying and, winning the Congressional Medal of Honor, and he's stuck at home still.
Harry's so great.
Yeah. Harry does get the friggin' life in this movie.
He certainly does.
Certainly a selfish bastard when it comes down to it. That's a behind-the-scene montage with Harry.
They what?
He pulls him out of the friggin' the pond in the early scene, saved his life, and then ever after that, Harry was just constantly dominating him in every which way.
He really was. Well, because George is like, go get your thing, go get your job.
Go finish your college degree. Yeah, bastard. Yeah, go ahead. So that's good. So he's gone that whole piece, and then I think from there is when it goes to the bank scene, right?
The bank scene. What bank scene?
The bank scene where Uncle Billy loses the money to Pop.
Oh yeah, but they first show George walking in the with the paper.
With the newspaper, proud of his brother. So see, he's a bigger man. He's still proud of his brother, no matter what.
He's so proud of him. George walks over to Ernie, right, the cab driver, and he's like, "Hey, look at the paper. Ernie's getting the Congressional Medal of Honor and all that, right?" And then Ernie's like, "Oh, it's gonna snow," when he makes that little joke.
Yeah.
He's like, "It's gonna snow." But how about Ernie? Ernie's like, "Yeah, that's awesome. That was awesome of Harry to do that. But I parachuted into Normandy on D-Day."
Yeah.
He just mentioned that in the last montage.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's a great
I'm no
point,
slouch.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, he's a hero. I parachuted into Normandy.
Yeah, no, and he's bringing the newspaper. That's a good point.
Yeah, he's like, awesome.
The guy's still happy-go-lucky too. He went into Normandy and saw what he saw, and he's still Ernie the happy cab driver.
By the way, I had a question about the future, the Ernie without George Bailey. Like, how did his wife? We'll get into it. We'll get into it. But so his wife left him when he wasn't he still fighting the war? When did he get the shack in Pottersville?
That was good.
So I put a pause to the conversation there, but I wanted to let you know as we're getting closer to Christmas, this episode has gone up on the 22nd. Look for another episode on the 23rd, and there will be a final Pottersville coming out on Christmas Eve. So you can get your family together around your smart speaker, or you can all share earbuds on Christmas Day, and you can relive the entire Pottersville adventure. I want to thank everybody who has listened and subscribed so far, and Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays to everybody.
Fans not experts.
Wish I had $1 million. Hot dog!